Alright, this is probably going to be by far the weirdest video I've done in this series of 52 weeks, because it's not 100% self-improvement based, and it's not really an advice, but the question, what is your favorite cheese, is actually my go-to Tinder pickup line. That's end of the video. No, the reason why I'm telling you about this is because roughly a year ago, I found myself single and looking for a job. And what I didn't realize is that because I was on Tinder and I was just looking around, having a bit of fun, going on dates, I was treating this app, which by the way I hate. I really don't like Tinder. I don't like what it does to society. I don't like what it's done to the dating atmosphere, how people really don't know how to talk to each other anymore, how everybody's developed extremely superficial standards, how people's ego gets boosted, just how many guys struggle to even get a match or go out on a date. It's really brought out, I think, a lot of bad in society. But it was also one of the most entertaining social experiments for me ever. And it taught me a lot about job interviews, and I didn't realize it. So at the time I was doing a lot of dating. I was just sort of going out whenever I had the time. And then I started doing job interviews. And it just clicked that it was the exact same thing. You know, you're sitting there and you're trying to sell yourself. You know, just except that on a date you're trying to sell yourself for sex, and on a job interview you're trying to sell yourself for the position. But the concept is very much the same. And what it boiled down to, I think, further than just the first interaction, because the question of what is your favorite cheese, and we'll get to that, is a very smart one because it stands out from the crowd. What made me different when it came to job interviews, I think, was my CV. My resume was just different from everyone else. And I specifically wrote it in a Word document, which was one page. I said, I want to have my CV on one page, condensed, only the things that are absolutely important, no picture, no fancy fonts, none of that shit. I want to make sure that my CV is so different from everyone else that it's almost impossible for people not to read it and not to go, wow, this guy's different. And it worked, because I got, essentially at the moment, I can only describe it as a dream job. And a year ago, I didn't even know there's jobs like these existed. Going back to the question, what is your favorite cheese? The way I usually describe it is the following. For every woman on a dating platform, there are usually about 20 men. And so you have to take it as a whole that every time you're talking to a woman, that she's talking to 20 other men. Now, if all these 20 men, just imagine for a minute that you're a woman and you're sitting behind a big table and there are 20 dudes sitting there and you're having a conversation with them at the same time. And 19 of them write, hey, how are you doing? So now you're going to have to answer 19 times how you're doing. And then they're going to ask you the next boring question and the next boring question. And this is going to go back and forth for several hours or several days. But then there's one dude at that table that out of nowhere comes up with a crazy weird question like, what is your favorite cheese? And it's impossible for this woman, who's had 19 boring conversations, to not go and say, wow, I don't know, my favorite cheese is gorgonzola or Gouda or, whatever else cheese she likes, Pecorino Romano, or the good old Parmesan cheese. The idea is that you pose something which gets the person, first of all, thinking. You got to get them to think. And number two is you just have to stand out from the crowd. And I realize it's not that difficult to do. Now, this video might sound or read or view like a bit of a Tinder guide, and it's not intended as that at all. For me, Tinder was a showcase of what women are like, what men are like, what women like, and what men like, and how we're totally and utterly discombobulated in this massive space of all options. And it's similar in the job environment. If you were to get access to, for example, resumes of all the people, CVs of all people who applied for a certain job position, chances are you would see a lot of them using the same templates, a lot of them using the same language, a lot of them naming things that are unimportant, naming certain schools they've finished, naming certain achievements they've done that are irrelevant for the job position. It's all about putting that little bit of extra effort, but making sure that your content, if this is a piece of paper, if this is an ID, if this is whatever it might be, yours has to be just that little bit extra, different, special. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to go through an entire rewamp system. It doesn't mean that in order for you to dress in a unique way, you have to go change your entire wardrobe. It doesn't mean that to sound different, you have to go alter your voice and start voice acting lessons or things like that. You don't have to take it to the extreme. It really is that little bit of extra effort that it just takes to create some type of twist. And what I realize is that whether it comes to dating, whether it comes to job interviews, whether it comes to just general conversations, it's an extremely potent and powerful tool when talking to people, when communicating, when trying to create, hear me out here, first impressions. They are extremely important. Your first impression is perhaps the most important thing. First impressions are so important today because we have access to so many people. For all that it matters really is you could go up on Instagram and open up somebody's story, which is there for 24 hours, and you will judge them based on that story. You will judge them based on a quality of a picture that was taken 3 years ago. You will judge them based on a crack in their shirt that's 10 years old from a picture that's fine. We judge people on things that really don't matter, but that's because that might be our only first impression of them. And so it's extremely important that what you do is you prepare yourself so that when you do have first impressions with people that you value. So frankly, it doesn't matter if you're going on a date and the woman is just somebody you really fancy. Perhaps this is about going to a family reception. It's about meeting somebody important. Perhaps it's some sort of job interview, like we mentioned, where you have to talk to a potential employer, your future boss. You want to create a healthy first impression. Obviously, you're going to build from there. Obviously, this person will eventually see that, hey, perhaps you lied on your CV. Perhaps you created this mask, this illusion that there's certain things that you know how to do that you actually don't. And it's fine. You'll cross that bridge when you get there. I'm not saying lie. I'm not saying deceive people. Do not be deceptive. But you can craft a story to a little bit more favor yourself. The quote, fake it till you make it, really does go a long way here. But if we wrap it all back, and we get back to the beginning and that very simplistic question, what is your favorite cheese? The idea of standing out, the idea of also getting the other person to really start thinking about it. The reason I said this is because in many of the job interviews that I did have, especially those that were outside of the culinary environment, you see, finding employment in the kitchen is a little bit different than finding regular employment, but what I found works brilliantly is to also ask the person on the other side a question or two or perhaps even three. Sometimes it's a very simple question. It could be a question of, look, I'm applying for this job. Are you happy with the position that you have? Are you happy with the current role? Are you happy with the current environment? Is there something that you, as an employer, would like to change in your environment? I want to make sure that the place that you're entering is actually a healthy place for you. Because the worst thing that happens is that you get into a job and you sit there, it's an office or whatever work you might be doing, and realizing that nobody else likes the job. Because that will create a toxic environment. And sooner than later, you will start to hate that environment too. Now, I know this one is a little bit all over the place, and perhaps I could have done a better job at wrapping it all up. But I think that Tinder and job interviews have a lot of similarities, which if you can master one, you should be able to master the other. And that's why I'm not going to say, here's some advice for how to get chicks, but I'm also not saying, here's some advice how to get a job. What I'm saying is, there's a healthy ground somewhere in the middle, where there's things you can learn, where there's a good CV you can write, where there's a good story you can craft about yourself, which you can then distribute to the world, and you'll get more success, and you'll get more progress, and you'll get further, and you'll learn more about others, but also you'll learn more about yourself. And one final tip before I go is that in order to be interesting, you have to be interested. Thank you and good night. Take care and safe flying.